Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's personal attorney for years. As you saw there, his testimony before the House Oversight Committee back in 2019 led directly to today's lawsuit. He is the host of the Mea Culpa podcast and author of the new book, Revenge, which is out next month. Good to have you here.
Good to be here, Chris.
Listening to the recitation by Tish James of the scope of these fraudulent practices, what was your reaction? Did that sound familiar?
Well, it was interesting because, like everyone else I was watching, I had no idea what Attorney General Tish James was going to say. And so when she mentioned my name, I was obviously quite elated, to be honest, because I'm finally getting the recognition for what I've been sitting on the mountaintops yelling for 3.5, 4 years, which is that the Trump Organization is a criminal enterprise and that I got thrown under the bus by dear old Donald. Simply, as you stated in your intro, somebody has to always fall on the sword for him. Right now, it looks like it will probably be one or both of his kids, and possibly himself as well. The one correction that I do want to make, Chris, is what Tish James said was not that it's a $250 million request. That's the baseline. Yeah. And I've been known to also now state that I believe that that number will be at least 2 to 3 times, at least 2 to 3 times is a penalty for all of
you're saying in terms of what she's seeking in restitution?
Yes, because she didn't have an opportunity to go through, as you said, the labyrinth of organizations. And so when they finally do and they realize the extent of the IRS issues, the usage of these personal financial statements and so on, each one of those carries a responsibility, and in this case, a financial responsibility. And I believe it'll be somewhere in the ballpark of about $750 million.
You know, the magic of real estate development is the use of leverage and the use of the equity that you have in a structure, right, in a property to get bank loans, right? And as that value rises, if you're using leverage, you could just make a ton of money, right? You put a little bit in, the asset value rises, you pay it off, and all of a sudden you've created all this money. It seems to me that
non-taxable
money, right, particularly in the realm of commercial real estate, like these developments, that the key here is that
it's mind-boggling.
You're just creating tons of profits out of thin air by systematically lying about how much your buildings are worth, right?
So let's just call it phantom net worth. Because that's really what it was. He used that system in order to dupe the system. But the way that he did it is the part that Tish James was so angered about, which is to make allegations, for example, that his home, the triplex apartment here on Fifth Avenue, is 33,000 square feet. And there was a number that they claimed price per square foot that has not only never been even in the realm of the building, it's actually never been achieved in the entire city of New York, regardless of the sky rises that are going up here at the most expensive price per square foot ever seen anywhere in the country. But his exceeds it by 2 to 3 times.
It's so flagrant. So I want to play this clip because it's a great example. And it's also just black and white. Like, we know you can go and take a tape measure of the apartment, right? If you lie about the square footage, it's
Why, Chris? Why do you need to take a tape measure? The guy built the apartment himself.
Right, but
he's the developer.
My point being is...
And the owner.
This is an easy thing. This is a knowable fact in the world to lie about so flagrantly. Take a listen to how she walked through exactly this fraud. Take a listen.
Mr. Trump represented that his apartment spanned more than 30,000 square feet, which was the basis for valuing the apartment. In reality, the apartment had an area of less than 11,000 square feet, something that Mr. Trump was well aware of. And based on that inflated square footage, the value of the apartment in 2015 and 2016 was $327 million. To this date, no apartment in New York City has ever sold for close to that amount. Tripling the size of the apartment for purposes of the valuation was intentional and deliberate fraud, not an honest mistake.
My question is, why were you guys, when you were there, able to get away with this?
Well, let me be very clear. Donald would call us in and he would say, I want to be higher on the Forbes list.
Right.
And so what I need to do is, I'm not worth $6 billion.
Right.
I'm worth 7.
Right.
And then 7 would become, I'm worth 8. Right. In fact, I'm actually really worth 10. So this guy added $4 billion of net worth in a matter of 8 to 10 seconds. Our job, what we were tasked with, was to take the assets that existed in the previous year's personal financial statement and come up with a way to get as close to that $10 billion as possible.
Right, so there's a target, and you're just there ratcheting it up.
Well, what we're doing is we're backing into a number.
Right.
But, you know, one of the things that Tish James puts into her indictment, into her papers, which is very different, and it's actually worse than even this as an example. And you have, by the way, this is an example with Mar-a-Lago. You have it with Seven Springs.
Everywhere. Clearly, I mean, at least as alleged, and as you've said,
every single asset is overinflated.
Right.
But the part that was by far the most egregious is when Donald was subpoenaed to provide documents that dealt with his taxes. Now, remember, that's after Donald filed an objection to the subpoena.
Right.
It went to court. He lost. It went to the appellate court. He lost. Went to the Supreme Court. He lost. Then they ultimately gave a series of documents. And that was supposedly all the documents that had to, and this is in Tish James's papers. In fact, when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, what ended up happening is they found documents that would have been responsive to the subpoena. So therefore, on top of everything, this dope has now added obstruction of justice as yet another claim. I mean, in fact, there's more claims for him than I think he has hair on his head.
You know, there's a question here about why this persisted for so long. I mean, to your point here about the tax documents, I mean, it does seem to me she talked about referring to the IRS, right? The obvious enormous no-no is to inflate for bank lenders and insurance purposes and deflate for the tax authorities, right?
Which is what he did.
Right, which is what you said. I remember you saying it in that you said, look, this was standard, right? Like when it's time to pay taxes, property's worth nothing. When it's time to get a loan or insure it, property's worth a ton, right? But when you get caught with that black and white, like the IRS does not look that favorably on it. I mean, that seems to me another issue for him here, to the extent that she's referring this to the IRS, because they have his documents.
Right. Bank fraud, wire fraud.
Right.
They throw in money laundering there. You have misrepresentation to a bank. You have the whole plethora of crimes.
Can I ask you a question that you may not be able to answer? How common is this in New York real estate? Like, how much is this a Donald Trump thing?
Look, I don't know because
you were
I don't
just
know.
there.
Right. I was at Trump for a little over a decade before that, private practice in a white shoe firm.
Right.
I don't know, but it's not common.
Yeah.
All right, it is not. I know many real estate developers with a lot of money, right? Legitimate, a lot of money. Not one of them values their apartments, which are newer, on higher floors, and in certainly better buildings with more amenities than his Trump Fifth Avenue apartment. Yeah. And not one of them is claiming that that unit is worth $375 million when, in fact, it's worth probably 50.
How close does it have to get? I mean, I guess the question I have here is, I have watched this, I've been covering this for 7 years, came down the escalator. There's this kind of crazy thing with him where it just seems like the fraud is flagrant, the going over the line, and yet seems to have gotten away with it. Now it seems like we're in a different space. He doesn't have the power of the presidency anymore. He's got a smaller circle around him. The amount of legal peril he has is so acute. I don't think it's ever been this acute before. What is your assessment of where it's at?
The reason that we're where we're at, and I thank our courageous and our fearless and our just absolutely fantastic Attorney General when she complimented me for basically being the start of it. I testified for over 400 plus hours between 7 different congressional committees, the Attorney General, the District Attorney, and so on. It's that documentation, which nobody has ever had before, and he never would have given it, that ultimately sparked this and sent this into the investigation that's going to ultimately terminate the Trump organization, Donald, Don Jr., Ivanka, Eric, Weisselberg, McConney, and the rest of them. This is going to put an end to the entire company.
You think that?
I believe so.
Michael Cohen, who has seen it from the inside and the outside. It's good to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time to come by.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.